introduced into evidence.
Investors looking at Apple's latest earnings front and center after the closing bell today. Will China's coronavirus affect the company's iPhone production? Let's talk to tech expert Paul Powers. Paul, good morning.
Good morning.
Is China the elephant in the room for Apple earnings today?
I think there are a few. So I'm sure that most of us are expecting the earnings call to actually go pretty well. The numbers should be pretty solid. But yeah, the elephant in the room is absolutely the coronavirus. You have tens of millions of Chinese citizens essentially in quarantine, and there's a very good likelihood that that will affect iPhone production for sure.
Dan Ives is saying whatever impact from coronavirus will be just negligible on Apple demand because he's focusing on millions and millions of customers having to upgrade their phones. Your thoughts?
That very well may be true. If I were Tim Cook, what I would make sure that I do going into today's meeting is because most of the Apple investors are long-term value investors, I would make sure that he focuses on three things. One is the coronavirus, but that's only part of it. I'd make sure that I get out in front of it and immediately say, this is what we expect will happen, but also these are the risks that we're not sure about. I'd be very transparent and direct with that. Second thing I would talk about is actually data, the concerns that exist around data privacy. There's this growing trend of concern in the U.S. about data privacy. We saw that in CES 2020 earlier this month, the first time we had a high-profile panel just on the topic of data privacy. Apple could do a lot to just be really transparent with people and tell them in plain English, not in their terms and conditions, what they're actually using their data for. And the last thing would be that I would get out in front of the concerns about antitrust measures that are potentially looming over Apple.
Apple stock is up about 1% right now, Paul, in the pre-market, and there's reports that Apple has asked its suppliers to make 80 million iPhones in the first half of this year. Is that encouraging to you?
That's certainly encouraging, but if you look at the long-term trends, iPhone sales aren't necessarily where we would hope they would be, especially in foreign markets. We start seeing Huawei actually quickly catching up and outpacing iPhone sales.
Yeah, and a good question would be, are Chinese customers more nationalistic? Will they go for Huawei over Apple? Paul, thank you very much for covering that with us.
Thank you.
Big numbers from Apple coming up. And then there's this, folks. Joe Biden is calling for witnesses in the Senate.